Welcome back to Auto Technic, and well, today we have our Euro Spec 94 F355 unexpectedly back in the shop. We just performed a complete inspection on this car and I returned it back to the owner. Unfortunately, the car has developed a miss. It's running pretty rough. So we're going to dig in a little bit, do some diagnostics, and see if we can't get to the root of the problem. Alright, so here's the skinny on this car. This happens to be that same 1994 Euro Spec F355 that we just completed that big inspection on. And really, this is the car that we're going to be getting into much deeper this fall. And the last video on this car, I ran through the inspection. I mentioned that I was going to put the car all back together. We weren't going to do any work at this time and give it back to the customer so he could enjoy it for the summer. And then this fall, we're going to come back and do all of the work that we've been talking about this car, which is a pretty big project. Well, unfortunately, the client picked the car up, ran it to a dry ice blaster, had some dry ice blasting done to the car. Once he picked it up from there, started driving it home, the car started running really rough, it was low on power. He could smell raw fuel come out of the exhaust, and eventually he ended up getting slowdown lights on bank 1 for cylinders 1 through 4. So, after talking back and forth with the customer, he swung by the shop for me to take a look at it and see if we can't get to the bottom of this issue, because frankly, with the car having that slowdown light on, smelling raw fuel, running rough, there's no point in risking the health of the engine and continuing driving the car this summer until we get those problems resolved. Alright, so I will admit, when the customer swung by and dropped the car off, I actually did spend a little bit of time going over my work and just seeing if there was a quick fix. I was really hopeful that I could find something quick and simple to get the car running well, to get him back on the road to where he didn't have to leave it here. And unfortunately, I was unable to make that happen, so he had to leave the car here. But what that means for you guys is I've already done some basic checks on the engine. I already kind of have a rough idea of what's going on. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and really just talk about what I've already done and what we're facing. Now, before we really get into this, if we really rewind back to the little video where I did the inspection on this car, the customer was complaining of a long start and really a rough start. So this thing, when it would first fire off, it really wouldn't catch. It would run pretty rough, and then it kind of brings itself up and runs pretty well. We talked about that. I didn't see anything super obvious during the inspection, and really what I talked about with the client after the inspection, when we were planning the scope of work that we're going to be doing to the car, I was really suspicious of basically our injectors, the flow pattern of the injectors, and really a little bit worried about the rubber that's inside the fuel tank that holds the fuel pump in position. So it's really common that that rubber deteriorates, that rubber gets into the fuel filters, it plugs the fuel filters, it causes problems inside the fuel injectors. And from what I saw in the car, we knew that it had healthy compression. We did have some O2 sensor faults when we did the inspection on the car that are pretty unusual, and the spark plugs didn't look too great. But we decided just to leave it, drive it for the summer. When it comes in for the inspection, we're going to be doing timing belts, we're going to clean the injectors, and we're going to replace the fuel filters. So we didn't feel that it was really worth chasing all those things at this time. Well, now that the car is running pretty bad, we're going to have to reevaluate that whole situation. Alright, so unfortunately I did do a cold start on this car this morning because it was sitting back here. Therefore, I had to get it fired up and on the rack, so I can't show you guys the cold start right now. However, I did record it to capture the roughness and how it doesn't really catch and pick up just right. It is an ME 2.7 car, so it does have a little bit of a long crank, which is pretty typical. But it's really, once it catches and starts to fire, you can hear that it's not really catching all the cylinders and running that great. It kind of stumbles and then brings itself to idle. Right now, since I moved the car around, the engine's already up to temperature, so we don't need to worry so much about the cold start. But I will bring you guys around, and we'll come in here and see if we can't get this thing fired up. And now that we have it running here at idle, there is a rattle on this side because it's running rough, so ignore that. But you can hear that it's really not smooth. You can hear it's kind of stuttering and stumbling. And really just not idling the way it should. Now again, this car is a 2.7 and it has a Capricho exhaust with some unknown cats on it, so it's quite a bit louder and throatier even at idle. Say, in comparison to the stock 99 F355 that I just serviced with the stock muffler, right? That's a 5.2 stock muffler. Those things just purr. These are going to idle a little rougher, but clearly this one's missing a little bit. And fortunately, when the client brought the car to me on the freeway. He was getting a slow down light on cylinders 1 through 4. Okay, I'm going to shut this off so I don't have to yell over the exhaust. Alright, so we're not talking over the car, but you can definitely see that it's not running well. Is what I was saying is when the client was bringing the car to me yesterday, he actually was getting a slow down light on cylinders 1 through 4. So since this is a 2.7 car, if we haven't talked about it or you're new, 2.7 car, I'm referring to the Motronic version. That's an early 355 OBD1. They are symmetrical systems. There's another computer over here, and that controls bank 2 of the engine, which is the driver's side. This computer over here controls bank 1, passenger side, cylinders 1 through 4, 5 through 8. With these Motronic systems, you can see there's 2 airflow meters. You can see up at the front of the firewall, I have 2 fuel filters because there's 2 separate fuel systems, 2 separate fuel pumps. Each ECU is completely independent of one another. So I have 2 sets of crankshaft sensors, 2 sets of camshaft sensors, 2 separate airflow meters, 2 separate coils, and everything runs individually. The best way to think of it is, this is an engine, and this is an engine, and the only thing that they have in common is a crankshaft. So you can actually get into situations where you can actually only be having this engine run on 4 cylinders, and really when that happens, since this system's so old and primitive, those ECUs don't really communicate with each other, so they're completely unaware and oblivious. So you could have one ECU completely happy, chugging along, running your 4 cylinders as it should, and you can have another one completely turned off, and this other ECU is completely unaware of it. Really, that's just one of the quirks of this older system. With the much newer cars and much more modern ECUs, they actually do talk to each other over a CAN bus, although you can still fire a car up only on one bank. So it's a bit different when you're diagnosing these Ferraris when they have twin ECUs like this in this symmetrical system, which is actually the majority of the cars. All of our V12s have this system, and really almost all of the V8s have this system, with exception to the 5.2 later 355s, the OBD2 355s. And then once you get into the twin turbo V8s, they traditionally just run one ECU for those cars. Alright, so we covered quite a bit. Let's recap. The customer brought the car to me yesterday. It was running rough like that. He did give me that very valuable information that the slowdown light for 1 through 4 was on. Now, there was no check engine lights that he's had, and when I got the car here, no slowdown light. Now, the main difference of the slowdown light from the check engine light is the slowdown light is triggered by the thermocouple at the back end of the cat, and it's basically a monitor to make sure that your cat's not overheating. Now, failures of the cat ECUs is pretty typical, and they actually do cause that slowdown light, but I do know from when I did this inspection that the cat ECU on the right side for bank 1 is actually one of the newer updated green epoxy cat ECUs, and the left side is the older black one. So if one were to fail, it would be unusual for that, but we also know it's running rough. So it gave me a good indication that that slowdown light was true, that we don't really have a issue with the cat ECU or thermocouple giving us a false signal, that it was information that we could believe. So when I had the car in here doing the inspection, I did have all the spark plugs out. We did do a compression test. So if this car comes back to me with a misfire, first thing I'm going to check is my work. I want to be sure that what I did and what I touched is good. So I obviously went back over, I checked, made sure I didn't, knock something loose, didn't accidentally disconnect an airflow meter or anything like that. The main thing I went to is down in there. You can see I have the spark plug cover off to get access to all the spark plug wires. I pulled that off. I made sure all of the spark plug wires are snapped onto the spark plugs, which they were. Obviously, I went and fired the car back up, no change. I ended up pulling all the spark plug wires off. I removed all 4 spark plugs only on bank 1, and we got some good evidence there. Cylinders 1 through 3 looked pretty normal and typical, and fortunately when I did the inspection of the car, I took pictures of the spark plugs, and I do number spark plugs anytime they come out, which was great because I was able to pull those pictures up and compare the state of the spark plug now versus when the car was in last and it was running better. Cylinder 4 clearly wasn't firing. It was very fuel soaked, very wet, and you could tell that was our problem cylinder back there. So it was actually so fuel soaked and so wet that I was actually questioning if it even had the ability to fire. And as a really quick down and dirty diagnostic, I used a old school technique with the spark plug sandblaster. I don't like doing this on spark plugs that I leave and running the car for a long period of time, but in a situation like this where I don't have an extra spark plug on hand, I can get it in there, get it blasted and cleaned up. because a lot of times when a spark plug is so fouled, especially when it gets down on the base of the porcelain inside the threaded body of the spark plug, it cannot generate enough heat to really come back to life and start firing again. So even if you clean the tips of it, it's hard to get it to not continue the misfire. So I use that blaster, and the only word of caution I'd use, because it has glass media in it, is when you're done, you really want to spend some time blowing out the area in between the porcelain and the threads to be sure that there's no glass media stuck in there before you stick it in the cylinder and run the car. But I went and blasted just the spark plug for cylinder 4, put everything back together, fired the car up, seeing if that made a change. No change. I'm really skipping steps here. First thing I did is hooked up the SD1 and read faults. And we had no faults in the car, or no faults that were different. This car had some pretty unusual O2 sensor faults for both banks when we did the inspection. Again, we noted that, and that was kind of along the lines of when we were going to do the service and take care of the injectors, we were going to basically reevaluate after the service work on the car to see if those faults are still there. So I did the SD1, had the car running. Also, another important note, looking at live parameters when the car is running with the SD1, the right-hand catalytic converter was 200, 300 degrees hotter than the left-hand. So that is the cause of our slowdown light, and there is something wrong with this bank of the engine, causing the catalytic converter to be far too hot. Obviously, the misfire that we're dealing with. So, back to the spark plugs. I cleaned that one spark plug, no change. It was hard to tell, really, with it just idling, because there wasn't much runtime on if that cylinder was throwing a bunch of fuel in it or not. I was kind of poking around, and you can get access down here to the number 4 spark plug. So I had the engine idling, I unplugged that spark plug, no change in the idle quality of the engine. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Plugged it back in. I ended up eventually going and removing all the spark plugs once again on bank 4. I put them all through the blaster, so that way they're all uniform, even, same state, so I can put them all back in and then compare them with one another after I ran the engine. The results from that were basically showing cylinder 3 and 4 weren't really looking that used. They look pretty brand new, not much coloration, no fuel on them. It almost looked like there's 2 straight complete dead misfires. 1 and 2, you could tell evidence of the coloring and browning on the porcelain. So I thought that was a little bit unusual, especially since these use a wasted spark system, so it uses 2 coils per bank. Basically, one coil fires cylinder 1 and 4, the other one fires 2 and 3. So if I had a bad coil, it would affect 1 and 4 at the same time, not necessarily 4 and 3. Now, jumping back and talking about the symmetrical ECUs with this 2.7 car, just because it was quick and easy, I did go disconnect the ECU for bank 1 and I fired the car up. So this had me effectively only running on bank 2 on 4 cylinders. And the car fired up and ran pretty smooth. Actually, I can show you guys right now. We can take this and disconnect it. And we'll fire the car back up. Now, it's not going to be running that great because it's dragging along 4 cylinders. But you can see that it's running quite a bit smoother than it was when that was plugged in. Let's shut this back off. So the reason why I did that, because it's telling me, okay, this engine is firing and running on bank 1, although it's not necessarily an issue with bank 1 not running. It's an issue with the quality of bank 1 not running, or just one of the 4 cylinders that is not functioning properly. So it was just a quick, easy test that I can do because I'm right back here and I have access to the connector. So we knew by unplugging the ECU, the car runs smoother overall. So we know, yep, it's definitely an issue on bank 1, but it's not all the cylinders. So it was pretty telling when I unplugged the fuel injector and had no change. I should have a cylinder drop out and it should run noticeably rougher when I do so. So from there, I ended up pulling the number 4 spark plug wire back off once again. I'll bring you guys over here. And I use this guy right here. This is what I like to use for spark plug tester. It is a HEI spark plug tester. And I like it because if you notice, there's no center electrode there essentially. That center electrode is buried down in that porcelain. And the reason why it's buried down in there is because this simulates cylinder pressure. So if I were just to pull a spark plug out, ground it, and then see if I have spark, there's really no resistance for that spark to jump that gap, because when your engine's running and you have all that compression, that's quite a bit of resistance for that spark to jump the gap. So if you have a weak spark, that's not going to show you, but then once you have the compression, it may not be able to jump the gap, and that could be your issue. So I use these HEI spark plug testers Well, they're quick and easy, right? They snap in, you clip it onto a ground, but also it's basically telling you the quality of your spark. You have good, strong spark. So I put this on the number 4 spark plug, put it on the ground, fired the car up, and absolutely plenty of spark there. All right, so that pretty much has us where we're at with this diagnosis, and that's the things that I checked yesterday. Now, before we continue on, and I will admit, I have a very strong idea of where I'm headed with this. But before we move on with that, I want to take a second, because it's just so quick and easy. We're going to set this back up on cylinder 4, fire the car up so that way I can show you guys the spark on it, just as a visual aid for you. All right, we got the spark plug tester on cylinder 4, so we're going to fire it up. And bring you guys around. And you can see we have plenty of good, strong spark. Also note, with that spark plug wire off, there's almost no difference in the way it's running. So, obviously when I have the spark plug wire off the engine, I'm deliberately causing a misfire. Cylinder 4 is not firing. And you can tell that it really didn't change the way the car idled. So that's more evidence or reasoning for us to continue digging in on cylinder 4. The car is in last. We knew it had a good compression test. So, you know, a car needs compression and air, spark and fuel for an engine to run. That's it. We just confirmed spark. Last time the car was in, we confirmed it has good, strong compression. The only thing left to really focus on is the fuel side of things. So I'm going to reconnect the spark plug wire for cylinder 4. We're going to fire the car up one more time, so that way I can show you guys the lack of difference once I disconnect the fuel injector for cylinder 4 with the car at idle. Alright, so the spark plug wire is back on. The fuel injector is still plugged in. I'm going to come down here and see if I can't get this disconnected with one hand. Alright, I got my hand on the injector. Nope, hold on. See if I can't get this injector just right there. And I just unplugged the injector. And you can hear no difference still. So I should have had the RPM drop and the car run a lot rougher once I disconnected that injector, but no dice. Made no difference. So when I disconnected the fuel injector, you would expect the engine RPM to drop and the engine to run a lot rougher, because I should be dropping that cylinder. Since that didn't happen, that is just even more evidence that cylinder 4 is not firing. Either it has incomplete combustion or no combustion at all. So here's the information that we have in front of us. We have faults for both Motronic ECUs for the O2 sensors out of range, although our multiplicative and additive values don't really look abnormal. We know that our bank 1 cat is getting too hot. We know that we have a slowdown light for bank 1, which matches our cat getting too hot, meaning when he's driving the car, he's getting in just right enough conditions to get enough heat in the cat to trigger that slowdown light. So our problem is on bank 1. We know that we have good spark on bank 1. We saw evidence of the spark plug that it wasn't firing. We also know that if we disconnect the fuel injector on bank 1 with the engine running, it makes no difference. The engine still runs rough. Furthermore, when we disconnected the Motronic for bank 1 and just ran it on bank 2, it ran a lot smoother, which is indicating the problem is 100% on bank 1. Jumping back to the fuel injector. We disconnected it. No change on idle speed and idle quality. Still ran rough on cylinder 4. Definitely a red flag. Something going on with that injector. So you can see that I got fender covers on the car, because I am going to proceed to removing both plenums, and we're going to pull both sets of fuel injectors out of this car, get them on the bench. We're going to be flow testing them, cleaning them, and really evaluating the health of those injectors, because I think that's the root of our problem. Before I do that, it may seem a bit unnecessary, but it's so easy, there's no reason not to do it. You'll notice I have my fuel filters, and right up on top of the fuel filters, I have a Schrader valve port on both sides. Now, when I'm diagnosing a car, I really do not like making assumptions. I really try to base my entire diagnosis off known facts, even if they seem basic and elementary. Because it's so easy to get to the fuel filters to measure the fuel pressure, why would I not do it? I'm going to do it right now before we tear the car apart, because what if I get to the fuel injectors and I don't find anything unusual? It would be nice to know, and I don't want to have to reassemble the car just to measure fuel pressure. So it's so quick and easy to get to, there's no reason not to do it now. So I'm going to get my tools on there, measure fuel pressure, because again, it's 2 separate systems. It's 2 fuel pumps, 2 sets of relays, 2 Motronics controlling them, 2 fuel pressure regulators. So I want to be sure that they're equal, side to side, running well. All right, bank 1, fuel pressure. 58, 59 PSI, which is what I would expect. Let's see what bank 2 looks like. All right, bank 2 fuel pressure. And we're bouncing right at about 55, 56. Kill this car here once again. All right, so we have what, a 2 psi difference from left to right bank. I'm just going to note it. I'm not going to chase after it right now, but we have tangible information now. When we're making the rest of our diagnosis on the car, we can look back at that and know what that fuel pressure is. I just don't need to assume that the engine has good fuel pressure because it's running, and assume that it has equal fuel pressure bank to bank. Now we know it. Took a couple seconds. Again, I don't like making assumptions. It's all known facts. Even if they seem simple or unrelated, it makes it a lot easier down the road. All right, guys, there's one more thing, and I apologize for being all over the place. I really wish I could have done this start to finish on the car with you guys bringing you through the process rather than trying to catch you up. But yesterday when the client was here, I also did use my 5-gas analyzer. So I did take this, went onto the manifolds pre-cat, and I pulled the emissions off the car. And again, I'm very fortunate that we did the inspection on this car. So you can see right here, I have my emissions report from when the car first came in, and you can see that my CO is really at 1%. My hydrocarbons were at 227. This is bank 1 at idle. And here's my emissions report from yesterday. See, my CO went up, hydrocarbons are definitely up, air fuel ratio running a bit richer there versus the 13.4, or is it 13.9? So again, it's just a lot of evidence pointing in the right direction that we have definitely an issue on bank 1. Bank 2 was actually running not as great also on my emissions, but they weren't as much of a jump as bank 1. All right, so I have all the evidence that I need to really justify digging in and pulling these fuel injectors out. So unfortunately on a 355, in order to get the fuel injectors out, I have to pull the plenums off of the engine. Now on the 99 355 that we serviced, we pulled the plenums off, but the engine was out of the car. So this one's going to be a little bit different because the engine is in the car. It's doable. Really, it's a little bit more work because you have to lean over the car to get to it. The worst part about it is I don't have very good access for you guys showing you how they come off. To get started though, I'll do my best to walk you through it. I'm going to pop off my air boots for both airflow meters to get the airflow meters off the way. And then I'm going to pop off this beauty cover right here that covers my coolant expansion tank and the power steering reservoir. It's going to give me some access in the center in between these plenums because that's the majority of the work that we're going to be doing. Also, we have all of our vacuum hoses. It's hard to see here, but maybe I'll clip in some footage of the last engine that I did. But there is vacuum hoses that run up to the plenum to each independent throttle body. We have our idle valves here, and there's one on each side. Since this is a 2.7 car, it has one idle valve on either side. The 5.2 cars actually have the center idle valve and a Y, so we'll need to get those disconnected. And there's small vacuum lines that run to the plenum for the fuel pressure regulators. So I'll get all of that stuff disconnected, and then we'll jump to the center and see what we need to do to get these plenums all the way off. All right, quick update here. You can see that I've removed my airflow meters, disconnected my idle valve. Under here you can see those vacuum lines that I disconnected off of the plenums. We have our beauty cover up and off. I was able to pull the power steering reservoir off those two studs where it mounts to either plenum, and I got the coolant reservoir off as well. Note that these have rubber grommets here, but they also have these studs on the bottom side. So there's 4 of them. There's no studs for where the power steering reservoir goes up here. It's only these 4. Take these off. I take them out of those rubber grommets because the last thing you want is to drop one and then try to find it. And I found sometimes they get stuck in the rubber grommets when you lift this expansion tank off, and then as you're working on the car and moving around, they fall out. So anytime I lift that expansion tank off, I just take them off and get them out of the way over on the bench, so it's one less thing to worry about, because all the work we need to do is up in here now. So you can see I have some oil vapor lines right there on the center. Those 2 braided lines that run up to the plenum, I need to disconnect those. Grab my light again so we can see what we need to do. All right, so we got the light kind of trying to hold it so it holds the reservoir out of the way. So I got those braided lines that I need to get disconnected. Also, you can see that we have those 4 hose clamps on the plenums that we need to get those taken off. And that's going to allow me to pop the plenums off. You can see right there. So whoever did this last, they oriented the hose clamps. You can see that all the heads of them are pointing towards me, which makes it nice. See if that reservoir stays. So these are the hose clamps right here I'm talking about, where they're pointing rearward up here and the forward one. So makes it a little bit easier versus where they're oriented from the factory. And I did mention that on our belt service video on that 99 F355 when I put the plenums back on pay attention to the orientation. You want to point them in the valley towards the rear. So in an instance like this, it's nice for me to get them off. But also on the ones on cylinders 3 and cylinders 6, you need to be sure that they're not hitting the throttles, causing a stuck throttle. And you can see that's why this one's oriented over here on the back side actually, so that way it's not in the center interfering with the throttle. So I'm gonna go through, get these hoses right here off, get all these taken off, and we should be able to just pop the plenums up at that point. All right, so I have all 8 of these. I guess you could probably refer to it as a hose clamp, although they're specific to these throttle bodies. It's essentially a hose clamp. And these clamps go on and hold these clamshells on. So essentially this is really what's holding the plenum on. There's a rubber gasket that these are slid over, and you can see that they're split in the center 50-50. And this has an ear on either side with a lip that engages on the plenum and the throttle body, and they squeeze tight via these hose clamps to squish and seal the rubber that's in between the plenum and the throttle body to hold everything on. So you can see the plenums are kind of loose, but I can't lift them off, and that's because of the ears on these shells, and I need to remove all 4 of them on each side to get them off, or I should say all 8, because there's 2 per cylinder. So bring you guys over here, and usually just a screwdriver. As you can see, I can get into that gap and just kind of prime like that, and it falls off, and just like so. And that exposes, if I get in here, try to grab these so they don't fall, make things harder on myself. I need a magnet for the other one. But now that you can see right there, there's our rubber boot that's sealing the plenum to the throttle body, and the plenum just sits on this. So once I get the rest of these clamps off on the other cylinders, I'll be able to take this plenum and lift it straight off. So I'm going to get those knocked off. I need both hands because space is tight in the forward cylinders, and we should have the plenums off here in no time. Alright guys, so you can see that it actually wasn't too bad to get the plenums off with the engine in the car. Truth be told, it's quite a bit easier to get them off than it is to get them reinstalled. Getting those rubber boots, those clamshells and those clamps back on is a little tricky because if you move the plenum, you kind of bump it, they fall off. Wiggling the clamps through, get everything on. It takes a little bit more time on the reassembly versus the disassembly. Now you can see that I have access all the way down to my fuel rails and my injectors. That's what we needed. However, I'm gonna stop right here. The reason being is I prefer to leave the fuel system complete and sealed, so that way I don't have to worry about any fuel vapors or fumes or fuel leaking out of the car, because the equipment that I need to service the fuel injectors has not arrived yet. So I actually had to place an order for it. I have not had the equipment. It's been on the Dream Shop tool list that I have, and once this car encountered this problem, I was like, well, looks like I'm buying it sooner than I was expecting. So I have all that stuff on order. It should be here in the next couple days. Once that arrives, I'll bring you guys back. We'll pop the injectors out of the car. We'll get them on the bench, and we'll start experimenting around with the new equipment and seeing what we have, seeing if we can get to the ultimate cause of why this car's not running good. So I'll see you guys back here in a couple days. Good morning. My tooling came in, so we're back on the 355. Hopeful that we can get this thing buttoned back up and back to the customer today. I've already went ahead and disconnect my fuel lines and pulled the fuel rail out of bank 1. I left bank 2 in there for now. We'll come back to that later, but I wanted to focus on bank 1 since that's the side with all of our problems. As for our tooling, I purchased a Launch Ultrasonic cleaner and injection flow tool. So I mentioned earlier, I've always wanted one of these, haven't had a chance to get one yet. And it's going to be very nice to have this, not only to clean and service injectors, which is something that I do during major services or timing belt services, but it's also going to be a fantastic diagnostic aid, because I can tell you throughout the years, you always want to check injectors, but you can't really pull them out and check the flow pattern when you're diagnosing a car. And at the very minimum, this is going to give me the ability to visually see the flow pattern of injectors. And ideally, if it works the way they should, I can measure the flow rate and see if there's any problems with it. So I have all my injectors in there loaded up. We got cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is our suspect cylinder. I've already gone through, measured my resistance. I've made a little bit of an Excel chart so I can track the flow before and after cleaning. And with that, I think it's time to get this thing powered up and kind of experiment with it. I think where I'm going to start is on the leakage test and just see if they're leaking before we run into a flow test. So get that powered up. And are we running any pressure on that yet? There we go, starting to get some pressure built up. And I don't see anything leaking out of those injectors, which tends to be a good sign. And we're running 25 seconds. So we're gonna let this time out, and then we're gonna move over to the flow test. Okay, so all the injectors passed the leak test. Now all that test simply did was put pressurized fuel or cleaner above on the top side of the injectors without activating them, and we're just making sure that we had no visual leaks coming out of any of the injectors, which we did not. Everything was fine. Now I will say that all the manuals on this state to clean the injectors before you flow them on it. However, since we're kind of using this as a diagnostic aid with our drivability issue, not just a pure service, we're gonna run them beforehand, run a flow test, so we can check the spray pattern and measure the flow rate of each injector, so that way we can compare to after we service and clean the injectors. So with that, I think it is time to move over. And I will say that this is the first time I've messed with this tool, so I haven't actually got on here and ran it, but we're just gonna use the menu for an injector flow test. And there we go. And I can see some crumb floating in there, but that shows us, what is it, 2 and 4 are a little low. I'll set you guys down so I can read these flows and put them on our chart. All right, so there's a little bit of a deviation on the injectors and the flow test. I think between my highest and lowest, I had 11% spread. Cylinder 4 and 2 were my lowest 2 injectors on that side. So I think my next step is to run into a spray test, which is gonna give us a visualization of the spray pattern and see what we have. And that's just cylinder 4 there, cylinder 3. I wonder if I can get this to run all the injectors at the same time. All right, so there was this other option here, auto test. We're gonna run that, see what our results are. Looks like it's doing a flow test. not equal. 2 is still our lower one on that one. They're all at about 50, 47, 51, 51. All right, so it's counting down for me. It says time observation, so it's letting me count the flow rate on these. Not what I was expecting. I was expecting to see more problems here at this one. So it's giving me another timed observation limit. So we're looking at about 38 on cylinder 1, maybe about 36 on 2, 37 on 3 and 4. Looks like about 36. Looks like it's gonna drain it back down. I'd imagine it's probably gonna run back through that test cycle at a faster RPM now. That was showing 650, so that was about idle. Yep, 4,500 RPM. All right, giving me more time to observe. 45, cylinder 1. Looks like 44 maybe. Cylinder 2. Cylinder 3 is 45. And 46 on 4. A little bit of deviation there. Doing it again at 6,000 RPM. And once again, 45 on cylinder 1, 43 on 2, 44 on 3, 46 on 4. All right, so it looks like that auto test was definitely better than doing the flow test or the spray pattern test that I did after my initial leakage test. I think probably made more sense just to run a leakage test than run through the automatic flow test. I'm gonna take a minute. I'm gonna need to review the footage so I can document my numbers on my Excel sheet. I'm gonna pop the injectors out, get them in this cleaner. We're gonna run through a cleaning cycle, run them back through this tester on the same flow test, and see what the results are. All right, so we got the ultrasonic cleaner running. I ended up filling that up with some Berryman's B12. Actually, it's the same thing that I'm running through the injector cleaner right now. I wasn't able to get any specific injector cleaning fluid here on time, so I had to run the B12 through this. Now, I'm a little cautious on that because I know as I'm running through those flow tests that B12 has so much solvents and detergents in it, it's actually gonna be cleaning the injectors as I'm running through the test. So it's not ideal, but it's what I had. I was in a bit of a pinch. We got these in here. We're gonna run them through their cycle. I just have the bottom part of the injector in there. Once it's done, back in. What is this guy doing? Oh, it's running our injectors. Once we're done with this ultrasonic cycle, we're gonna throw them back in, run back through the flow tests, and we'll review the numbers. So they finished up through the cleaning cycle. You can see that I put them back in. I'm gonna run back through the exact same flow test, document all the numbers on my Excel sheet that I have made, and I'll show you guys the results for this bank 1. As for the ultrasonic cleaning, you can see that it did clean some gunk up out of there. So hopefully we'll see a little bit difference on the flow results, although from my initial tests, these didn't look as bad as I was actually expecting. So we're gonna get this dialed up right here and run through another test cycle. All right, so I finished up performing the flow test, cleaning and flow test of all 8 injectors. Now we divided it on bank 1, so I did bank 1 first, cylinder 1 through 4, then I came back and did bank 2, cylinders 5 through 8. Now, I will say that when I made my Excel sheet for the injector flow test with this tool, it was before I've ever had a chance to use this tool. You guys watched me use it for the first time with those injectors, and I was basing my charts off of other things that I've seen online, and I kind of missed the mark on it because I only had one set of data points, which I have it here. You can see I haven't even changed it for 2,500 RPM, and this tested the injectors, I think, at 625, 4,500, and 6,000 RPM. So it doesn't accurately reflect, and I was running through the test. I didn't have time to put that data in, revise the sheet. I just said, I'll deal with it later. But I think I'm going to go back and make the sheet so it has data points for all 3 points. So that way it's a little bit more accurate. Anyways, with that, I only captured the data points and tracked them at the 4,500 RPM test. So all of my yellow marks are before the cleaning. All the blue marks are after the cleaning. Really, you can see that we did pick up flow, and if you average out the numbers on the actual flow that we gained, it's about 10%. I didn't do the really fine-tuned math, but I just roughed it out, and it was about 10% across the board. As for the variation, you can see that beforehand up here at the top, it had a 9% variation from the highest cylinder to the lowest cylinder, and after running them through and cleaning them, we ended up with a 2% variation. So definitely saw an improvement with the machine. I saw an improvement on my overall flow, consistency, and reduced the amount of variation that we had in between each injector. Now, going into this, I was 100% expecting to see a big problem with the cylinder 4 injector, and much to my surprise, we did not see that. So since this car is coming back this fall for a very large amount of work, one of those items being a major service, which during the major service we end up putting spark plugs in the car, and it also gets fuel filters. After talking to the client, he decided, hey, let's go ahead, put those fuel filters in now, put those spark plugs in now. That way, it doesn't really cost us any money, so to speak. Meaning, we have the drivability problem. He wanted to do them now. The car's new to him. He doesn't know the history. But we were going to do them in a couple months anyways, so we're just going to jump the gun, do those now, and not do them when you do the major service. And in the end, it marginally is really not going to cost them that much more. So while I was waiting for the second set of injectors to clean up in the Sonic Cleaner, I went through and I replaced both fuel filters with new ones. And I will say that I did take one of the old fuel filters apart. I cut it open, pulled out the paper element, and I was inspecting it, mainly looking for contamination from degraded or broken down rubber. So I'd be looking for black rubber chunks or overall black hue to the filter. And that thing actually came out pretty mint. There was really no traces of rubber in there, which is great. I was suspecting all the rubber deteriorating in the fuel tank, but we see no evidence of that. Fuel injectors were telling me, hey, it seems pretty good. Fuel filter's clean. So it's nice that we now know with tangible information that that's probably not a big concern on this particular car. However, while I was putting in the spark plugs, I came across what I consider to be a smoking gun. It's kind of irritating that I didn't see this when we were initially looking at the car, but at least we did find it, so let me drop you guys in there and I'll show you what I found. Now before I drop you guys in and show you what I found, I think it's worth jumping back and talking about when I did the initial inspection on this car. It was the first time I've ever seen it, and we were working to do the compression test, and I ended up finding that the beauty covers that go over the spark plugs were completely siliconed in to the valve covers. Now from the factory, these are assembled dry with a paper gasket. These still had the paper gasket, but someone had used some black silicone, siliconed them all the way on, essentially gluing them in place. Now another thing that I noticed while I was doing that compression test is the seals for the spark plug wires where they enter the valve cover. There is a square grommet that sits at the back of the valve cover. It has 4 holes, one for each spark plug wire, and then it sits in a channel in the valve cover, and then that spark plug beauty plate just kind of bolts on top and compresses it in place, and that seals up the back end of the valve cover where the spark plug wires go in. Now I noted on this car that both of those were missing on both sides, and whoever worked on the car and applied all this sealant everywhere actually sealed up that whole cavity with all the spark plug wires with that black silicone. Same stuff that was holding the gaskets on and also the beauty covers on. Now when I pulled the spark plug wires out to do the compression test, I was careful to just leave everything intact because I didn't really want to mess with it. I didn't want to try to peel that silicone off or peel those wires off because I knew it would be a pain in the butt putting everything back together. So I pulled the bundle of wires out as one, moved it aside, did a compression test, put it back together. Well, when the car came back and the customer was having the drivability issue, same thing. I moved them away, out of the way as a bundle, and didn't want to separate them. Again, knowing that this is something we were going to take care of during the major service. Those grommets are on my inspection notes. It's on the estimate for the customer. So you guys are probably picking up that I'm making a bit of a point about this black silicone, particularly the missing grommets at the back of the valve covers and how they had the spark plug wires in. Well, when I was putting those spark plugs in, I just happened to move my bundle of wires out of the way so you can see them down here, and see if I can get you guys in and show you where they siliconed this all up. So you can see they just use a bunch of that silicone there. Try to switch hands so my camera focuses. So there should be a rubber grommet and 0 silicone, and the grommet should just pop off if you need to, but you can see that they got creative on this one. Well, as I was doing these spark plugs, like I mentioned, the number 4 spark plug wire came loose, and you can see the culprit right there. You can see the big chunk, the silicone braiding is off, we're down to the nylon, and it's right where they had that black silicone. So right there is the prime opportunity for spark to jump out and short out, especially considering that these wires are wedged. Get you guys in here so you can see, wedged into this small channel right here where it can just conduct right to the valve cover. You can also see all the silicone that I was talking about that they placed on there. You can see that it tore our paper gasket up there, and they siliconed the entire thing. Absolutely overkill. So back to our silicone right here, and you can see number 4 spark plug wire is sitting right there. And I don't really see the other part of that silicone on the wire. That looks like all the raw silicone that they used to put this in. So I don't know if that silicone on the spark plug wire, it's like a chicken or the egg. Did that spark plug wire get pulled off the big block of silicone that's there, and did it tear that outer insulation off? Or was the spark plug wire torn, and rather than replacing the spark plug wire, they used the silicone on the back end, glopped everything in, and put it back together? It's hard to say. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that. But after I found that, I came over to bank 2 and gave it a much closer look. And you can see on this one that it's all still fully intact with all 4 wires there. However, if you look right there, you can see that nylon coming out, and that's some of the insulation and braiding. If I get my light, give you guys a better view. And if I move this wire, you can see right there, that wire has a split or a cut in it. So again, this wire is damaged as well. We're never going to know what the true cause is, if that wire got damaged because they were placed in there without the rubber seals or the rubber grommets, and that was a band-aid repair, or did they get damaged because there was no rubber grommet and it rubbed on the metal of the valve cover and it didn't have that isolation, or did the wire come off and peel it? Again, we'll never know the true cause. I'm a little bummed that I didn't catch this earlier in the diagnosis. It's Murphy's Law because, like I mentioned, I consider this a smoking gun. There's really no way that we can repair those spark plug wires. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, well, gonna need to get those taken care of. Which also makes sense looking back at the diagnosis, because when I was diagnosing the car, I unplugged the injector for cylinder 4, and I noticed no difference on the engine running. And that's kind of what led me down the path of the injectors, because remember, I checked spark, and I had spark. But is what I'm thinking has happened is when I checked for spark on cylinder 4, I pulled my wire up here like this. I put in my spark plug tester, and I had it clipped up onto the shot ground, sitting just like so, to where the wire is hanging in free space, and it can't arc out anymore, so I had spark. But then if I install the spark plug wire back into the cylinder head, I place that wire next to the valve cover, and it's able to arc out. So I think, really, in the end, I had no spark the entire time, but during my procedure to diagnose it, I was moving the spark plug wire, which then was basically causing that short to come and go. So when I unplugged the injector to see if that changed how the car ran, the spark plug wire is installed and it was arcing out on the valve cover and I had no spark. And I unplugged the injector and sure enough, the injector was working. I unplugged it, it stopped, but it made no difference because I had no spark. And when I did unplug the injector, it did set a fault for the open circuit on the injector, which is to be expected on the control side. So it's just kind of bad luck and really a little odd one that got me. So I've already talked to the client. Replacement set of spark plug wires are on order. The replacement grommets are on order, and I ordered new gaskets up there for tops of the valve covers. Fuel rails are already back in, injectors back in, fuel filters back in, so I'm just waiting on the remaining parts. So in the meantime, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I need to clean all that silicone off of the valve covers and the spark plug wire covers. You can see here that this is right here is where they were sealed in, all the way on that top edge. These things, it took a lot of effort to get them off. And again, the same thing up here. You can see where the spark plug wires were, and this gasket didn't tear, but we're gonna scrape all that off, clean it up, and give it a fresh start. And now that I'm looking at that, we should look at our other one and see if we can see on the top side. Oh, there's no evidence there. I was hoping maybe at this top we'd see if that silicone was there and if that remaining piece of that spark plug insulation was on it. But you can see how this one tore a gasket, which this happened when I pulled them off for the compression test. Again, I was trying to just buy time with the customer and kind of kick the can down the road until this fall when we have the car in and we're really going to go through it and not address all this stuff right then and there. But Murphy's Law, here we are taking care of it now. So, like I mentioned, I'm going to go through, clean up all that silicone. I'm probably going to go and get the plenums put back on also. And that way, once the spark plug wires come in, that's basically all we're going to be waiting on. Get those wires in, get it fully buttoned up, and then we'll be able to fire up and see how well it runs. Alright, well welcome back YouTube. You can see that we're here a couple days later and the engine is pretty much all buttoned back up and together. So we finished cleaning up our valve covers where all that silicone was. We got the spark plug rails over there cleaned up. I'll show you those in a second. Got all that taken care of. We left the spark plugs in while I was scraping everything out. Everything fell in there, got it sucked out the vacuum and blew it off. Plenums are back on. Fuel rails, injectors are all back in. It's all real straightforward. My parts have arrived and I've already gone ahead and got the new spark plug wires replaced over here on bank 1. We also have the new spark plugs in as well. So essentially bank 1 is set. It's put back together, buttoned up, ready to go. We need to address bank 2. However, before we install the new wires on bank 2, there's a few things to talk about because, well, I learned some new things today, which is always fun. Not necessarily the way I like to learn it, but with these cars and this product, this is pretty much how you learn everything. So taking good notes and documenting things like this for future reference really pays off. Now, one thing to note, you can see that all that silicone they had on both sides of the gasket, it didn't really adhere on this side with the print. That stayed on the valve covers, and it came off on this side. So I got all that cleaned off. You guys saw the big mess and pile. And on these spark plug plates, you can see that I got them all back down clean, Scotch-Brited them, and got them looking the best I could. Now, one thing I wanted to note, and I noticed this when I was doing my initial inspections on the car, is these spark plug gaskets, or these cover gaskets that accompany these rails on the valve covers. I found it interesting because the existing gaskets are the same I have here, so the exact same replacement. But is what I found to be interesting on it, as we set this in place, you can see that these covers are only held on with 4 screws around the perimeter. And these gaskets, they're held on with what, 7, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 screws. So it's a radically different setup on these plates. And I noticed it, but fortunately, the holes that I need already line up on this gasket. So I wasn't really worried about it. And it's something that I don't recall seeing, and that's probably because this car is such an early spec car. So keep that in mind. We'll come back to that. Spark plug wires. Got our new replacement spark plug wires, and here's those rubber grommets that I said was missing on the end that keep them separated. And these grommets, you can see this is the other one right here. And you can see how it has that U groove in it. And if I take you to the car, so the groove on these grommets typically slide back in this channel on the valve cover, right back there, and it slides all the way down, and it seals off the end of the valve cover for our cover plate right there. And this is the area, if we take you over to our spark plug wires, where this is off of bank 1, where they had them all siliconed up. And if we go to the number 4 wire, right where all that silicone is, you can see where that tear was in the wire as well. So kind of like we mentioned, I don't know if that's the chicken or the egg. Were they trying to silicone that up to repair that damage, or did that damage happen from the wire getting peeled away from the silicone that's on the other bundle of wires? Hard to say. I don't think we'll ever know. So when I installed the wires on bank 1, I did remove all the wires from the engine, and I did test fit this rubber grommet in the back of the valve cover. And I thought to myself, man, that is a lot tighter than I remember. That didn't fit very well at all, and it's gonna get worse when I put the 4 wires inside the grommet. As you can see, the grommet kind of expands out a little bit, and you gotta slide them in. And typically those aren't too bad to slide in. On that 99 F355 that we just serviced, it has the 9 bolts for this front cover, and those grommets slid in no problem. I mean, nothing was an outlier. This is the first time I thought that was a little unusual. But I pressed forward, routed all of the wires, put them in the grommet, and I wrestled trying to get this grommet seated in the back of the head. And I actually was able to get it seated in there and sitting how it should be. However, the top of this grommet was sticking up quite a bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch plus, which was preventing this rail from sitting flat. It was sitting up on that grommet, and there was just no way, especially with the bolts so far away from the end of this, that I was gonna get that on. And I could tell something wasn't right. And I was thinking to myself, okay, let's jump back to this gasket with the different holes. When I was doing my parts order, I noticed that there was a production date split on the gaskets for these covers. And there is a late and early gasket. These are the late gaskets that I ordered, and that's because they were a fraction of the price of the early gaskets. And I knew from the last time someone worked on it that the newer gaskets fit just fine, and it's still gonna seal the perimeter, even though we'll have some holes that aren't used, but there's no openings up on top. So I figured there's no harm in that. We'll save the customer some money. But I was starting to think to myself, I need to go back and check the parts catalog on these rubber grommets. Maybe there's a late and early rubber grommet. Well, I go to the parts catalog, and I find a note for that rubber grommet that I did not notice when I ordered them, and it just says from assembly number, or I should say engine number 38151. meaning that these grommets were incorporated on all engine builds with the engine number that is equal to or greater than 38151. So I went back, double checked my engine number. Lo and behold, I am looking right here. I am 37729 is my engine number. So I mentioned to you guys, this is an incredibly early build, 94 355. Learned something new. That makes sense. So I'm basically, with the information I have in front of me at the parts catalog, I can see that this grommet does not apply to this 94 355. All right, easy enough. That production split on this gasket and number is probably differentiating this upper gasket right here, this upper plate, and the valve covers. So essentially, there's two different sets of valve covers for these 355s. And there's going to be this early style here that only has 4 bolts holding this cover on, uses those more expensive gaskets I referenced, does not use the rubber grommets. Then the later cars, they probably incorporated the rubber grommets. That's where they incorporated more bolts to hold this down better. Obviously making some effort to seal that up a little bit better than these early cars. So maybe this makes a little sense on what the last person was doing here, is they're making an attempt to get this to seal up, kind of like how the factory did on the later cars. Although we can kind of see the unintended consequences of it, where it ended up costing this client a set of spark plug wires and the labor to kind of work through this problem. So, lesson learned. On bank 1, since I figured all that out, I installed everything without the grommet. And I can tell you down there, looking at where those spark plug wires come through without the grommet, that is how it's supposed to be. It is so tight. That U channel where that grommet sits, I'm most certain is larger on the later valve covers, allowing that to be installed. Since this one's so early, there's no way that needs to be installed. We have proof that our engine number is below the date where those grommets are incorporated. So, like I said, learned something new. So that's all sorted. Bank 1 is done. I guys walked you through that. We need to take care of bank 2. The only other thing to note is on our spark plug wires here, these are a reproduction set. And if you notice the difference of the wire here up on the top, is it has these extra pieces of rubber that seal up into the cylinder head and valve cover. That makes it quite a bit tighter to get these down in the hole and seated. So I use my favorite item for lubricating things on assembly, which is glass cleaner. It's because it's mainly composed of alcohol, so it evaporates, it leaves no residue. I was soaking these down pretty good, sliding them in location, and then I actually ended up using the blunt end of a big pry bar to get on the top end of the spark plug wire, and I have to push those down to snap them in place. This is pretty common on the later cars, 458s, 488s, where you need to get the coils on, and it's really a matter of, you can't get your body weight above it because of the sail panels of the car. You can't get directly on it. You're kind of working up, trying to push that way. So getting this bar in there, you can kind of get them pushed in and snapped in. Using this made it a lot easier to get those on. So all of that ran through. I'm going to continue to get everything buttoned back up on the car. We're going to get the rest of the spark plug wires on. I'm going to get everything buttoned up. And at that point, I'm going to bring you guys back. We're going to fire it up, see how the cold start is, and see how well this thing runs. I can immediately notice that the hesitation this car had before is gone. So when we first inspected the car and I first drove it, it felt like it was breaking up. It had a hesitation pretty much up to about 1500, 2000 RPM. Completely gone. It's running super smooth now. Very nice. Sounds much better. Yeah, this is a massive improvement from where this was the first time we drove the car. That made a big difference. I really think it was a combination of all the things. We definitely gained some flow in the injectors. Got rid of that deviation. I think that's the most important part. But those bum spark plug wires, they really weren't showing symptoms till we messed them a little bit, but this thing's running a lot better. The client is going to be stoked. Love it. Honestly running so much better. I'm actually pretty surprised that there wasn't more symptoms, that we didn't catch those, the drivability on the first inspection. We noted it with that hesitation at low RPM. I guess looking back, my thinking was knowing we're going to dive in much deeper than a major service on this car, and we were going to sort things out then, so I wasn't really focused about it. Now, I did discuss with the client when we did the inspection on this car initially that I wasn't happy with the cold start and I didn't like how well it was running, especially at low RPM with the hesitation. We decided not to really dig into it any deeper because we knew we were going to be going into a major service, actually deeper than a major service on the car. So we were just going to let it be and look at it at the time. But that misfire got a lot worse, so it kind of forced our hand. But fortunately now, we got all those issues resolved and the car runs absolutely fantastic. He's going to be delighted with how well this runs. It's honestly going to be hard for me to keep it limited to my short test drive route. I just want to keep driving this thing. But, not my car. Not going to do that. As tempting as it is. Specifically this one with the ME 2.7. These early Motronics are so primitive and I'd say ignorant to a certain degree, to where this car had a dead miss and it doesn't even pick it up on the faults. It's a really early fuel injection, its diagnostic capability is really low, so you got to be careful on these older cars. Just because the car doesn't have faults stored in it doesn't necessarily mean there's not something wrong with it. Case in point with what we found on this car. Either way, once we get back from this road test, I will hook the SD1 back up to the car. We will scan it, read it, make sure our adaptive multiplicative values are falling back in range. They should be moving down because we increased flow on the injectors. Make sure we have no fault stored. Make sure our CAT ECU temps are the same side to side before we get the car back to the client. Well guys, find myself in a new situation that I haven't yet encountered. I lost all my footage for the end of this video. So I have never had that happen, but it did, and c'est la vie, right? I knew that it happened, and I just kind of made the decision, or I should say I knew that it happened pretty quickly after I finished filming the video. And I kind of just made the decision to let it be, and I decided that when I was finally to the point where I'd have the video edited, I would circle back and finish up this video and make the outro, which here we are now. Now I will say it's kind of a bit of a blessing in disguise, because I actually posted several other videos that feature this car already on the channel, and there's been some good dialogue in the comments, which kind of helps bring some clarification or a better understanding of the situation that we had in this initial video that I otherwise wouldn't have known, simply for the fact that those videos weren't yet posted. Let's circle back on the repair, guys. I mean, the car came in, looking back on it, 2020 hindsight, it seems simple, right? Car came in and it had a misfire, and just by dumb luck on the way I diagnosed it, it had a dead miss. I moved the spark plug wire off, number 4, because that was the one that was dead missing. I used my tester and I inadvertently eliminate the miss, although I don't notice it because the spark plug wire is still removed from that spark plug on cylinder 4. And I just didn't see the break on the wire. And from my method of testing the wire for spark, I kind of set myself up for failure on that one. And it's just the way it is. It's the unique environment of how the spark plug wires are laid in the valve covers, where this was damaged, how it was damaged, and it kind of set me on the path, since I had spark, but I didn't have spark, see? So I had spark when I tested it, but when the engine was running, it did not have spark, which that ultimately led me down the path to go in and suspect the fuel system with our fuel injector. And if you think about it, I had a dead miss, so when I unplugged the injector, there was no change on the engine because it was my ignition issue, not the injector issue, which when I was doing that, I'm like, see, there's no change on the injector. We must have something going on. Any of you that have diagnosed cars long enough, you can realize that it's always very easy to explain it after the fact with 2020 hindsight, and it's so easy to connect all the dots, but when you're working through the process and procedure, a lot of times you can kind of get bad information which sends you down the wrong path, which is exactly what happened here for me. Just the way it goes sometimes. But I will say the client and I did have the specific conversation when we were discussing the potential to remove the fuel injectors and clean them, do the spark plugs, and put in the new fuel filters. And that was the fact that that car is coming back in for more than a major service, but it's going to be back in the shop. And during that major service, I put spark plugs in the car, I replaced the fuel filters, and I cleaned the injectors. So we weren't really, in my eyes, throwing parts at the car in that sense. It did give me the opportunity to get the injectors out, visually look at them and see that either they were or were not the issue, which we saw that they weren't. But that was really a lot of service items that we were going to be doing anyways. So parts-wise, there's no difference in cost, because when I do that major service in the car, we don't need to buy those parts that time around. I'll just reuse the stuff I already put in. Maybe we lost a couple extra hours of labor because I'm doing it out of sequence, not part of the service. But it was well worth our time doing so. And really, at the end of the day, by doing that, it led us down the path that we needed to get to find the actual root cause, which was a spark plug wire. Now, I will say on the initial time that this car was in the shop, it did not have a misfire. Also, I will say, after replacing the spark plug wire, but servicing the fuel system on the car and getting the spark plugs in, it ran noticeably better than it did the first time this car ever came in the shop. I can tell you so much so that when the customer picked the car up and left, it was only a matter of 2 or 3 minutes
that I was getting text messages from him, and I can tell you that he was absolutely pumped with how good the car ran. He was very excited, very pleased, and it really did make a dramatic difference. So I do think that we did pick up some drivability and a little bit of power with the cleaning of the injectors. And, you know, fuel filters, probably not. That's just a bit of a maintenance item, but I really think all of it was in the injectors themselves. So it was worth it, and the client was very happy with the repairs. Now, I wanted to talk about really the root cause of this, which I think was the silicone on the valve covers. And that's where I say there's a lot of good comments and dialogue in my other videos talking about that, because on my inspection video, I talk about the silicone on the gaskets of the valve covers or the spark plug covers. And I kind of talk about the fact that I don't like that. And I had some people chime in and comment, and they say that it's pretty normal for them in their environments. Some of them were over in Europe, some technicians, and they're stating that it's pretty normal because water intrusion in 355s is a problem. And I completely agree. Water intrusion in a 355, specifically the spark plug tubes, is a problem. And it can get to the point where I've actually seen a lot of corrosion in the spark plug tube because of that. So their solution is to run that silicone and seal everything up. I'm still not sold on the idea of the silicone in there, because in this instance of this 355, it ended up costing the client a set of spark plug wires. And the spark plug wires, although are not terribly expensive, they're not inexpensive. So I think it's kind of, they had good intentions, but it ended up causing more damage because it's not very serviceable after the fact. Maybe you can seal up the rails, but not the end of the spark plug wires. It's hard to say. It's really user preference, but I will say that it's always been my philosophy that you should not be pressure washing a Ferrari engine bay. They are not very good for water protection, especially when you're talking about these 355s that are pushing 30 years old. If you look at a lot of the rubber boots on the electrical connectors, they're starting to break and fray. That it's incredibly common. So your electrical harness and just a lot of things in the engine bay are not very watertight. And if you're hosing your engine bay down, you're really just asking for a lot of problems, especially in the day and age we have now with dry ice blasting. If you want to have a nice pretty engine bay, dry ice blast it. Don't wash it with water. I'm saying this as me personally, I don't like the silicone on the spark plug cover rails. I think that's going to cause more problems down the road, just as we saw in this car. And I think that if the car is kept inside, not driven in the rain, and you're not pressure washing the engine bay, it's really not much of a concern to have to silicone those rails up. Maybe some guys keep their cars outside, they're driving them year round in the rain. Maybe a bit of a different situation, but that's really to where if I come into that situation, I'll have to discuss that with the client on what really is the best path forward for them and their car. I think the answer for the proper solution on to use silicone there or not is very subjective. It's very dependent on the car, the use of the car, and the owner's preference. There's not one answer that fits all situations. So it's really my job as a technician to advise the client of those options, what we can and can't do, the pros and cons of them, and really just help them decide what is best for them and their car. So one other thing I wanted to touch on real quick, which might seem counterintuitive, because a lot of people might see this as annoying working with the brand, and I hear a lot of people say stuff like that. And that's really the production date change on the spark plug covers with the 4 to 9 bolts, and also the rubber grommets at the end of the cylinder head. I want to bring this up because that kind of highlights one thing that I really enjoy about working on this brand, which seems counterintuitive because I've been working on these cars for 15 years, and that's the first time I encountered that. Meaning, after 15 years of working on these cars day in and day out, there's still stuff to learn. You still get curveballs thrown at you, and no matter how much you think you know, there's always more there to learn, either from other people or hands-on experience, and that's genuinely what I like about this brand, because it's never a dull moment. You're always bringing in new information. I'm always pushing to learn more, document more, and just learn more about the production date splits on these cars, better ways to service them. So in the moment, sure, it's super annoying. Yep, I get it. But for me, honestly, it's just brain food. I enjoy that stuff. I document that stuff. I keep a pretty deep catalog of notes that I have that I work on every car, just so I have this stuff documented and really help me out in the long run when I gain more knowledge and have a better, library of reference documentation. So with that, guys, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. I am excited to get this car back in the shop where we're going to undertake this restoration work that we have planned. You know the drill. Be sure to drop a comment below, like the video, share it with your buddies. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please do. I'd greatly appreciate it. I have a lot of great Ferrari content coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.